So Nintendo Switch Online originally launched on Nintendo Switch consoles back in 2018 with a feature set of things to offer, like a classic catalog of games, originally only supporting the NES, then expanding to the SNES, and of course supporting things all along the way, such as save, cloud, data backup, and the big thing, the ability to play online with your friends on Nintendo Switch games. That service was then expanded to Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack as an optional additional tier in 2021, with of course a price increase. Most notably, you get things like N64 games and Sega Genesis games access for upgrading to that higher tier membership, in addition to multiple DLC bundles. And in today's video, as we fastly approach the holiday season of 2022, there may be a lot of considerations on whether or not you should look into purchasing this service for either yourself or a loved one that you may be shopping for this Christmas season. And I want to share my personal opinion on where the service sits today in 2022 overall, and make that final recommendation on whether or not you should be looking into Nintendo Switch Online or the expansion pack tier this holiday. What's up, nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. As mentioned, guys, today we are looking at Nintendo Switch Online and the expansion pack tier as well. And before we dive into all of the offerings that this service does have packed in, because it is quite a bit more expansive than it was when it originally launched, we have to first briefly talk about the price point and the different plans around all of the feature sets that we will be going over here, because yes, there is a difference depending on if you subscribe to just the base Nintendo Switch Online service versus what is known as the Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack. Now, you do have a 7-day free trial available out of the gate for any new users for Nintendo Switch Online, so you can at least dip your toe in and see if you want to participate in things like NES and SNES classic catalog of games that we will take a deeper dive into in a little bit. And you can test out things like the online play in some of the notable games that are must own for Switch users, especially games like Super Smash Bros. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which also has an extra benefit for the expansion pack tier that we will be going over as well. But first off, you do have monthly options for things like the base tier, where you can have 1 month at $3.99, 3 months at $7.99, or the full 12-month membership for an individual at $19.99. Now you then look at the expansion pack price, and that goes up quite a bit. There's also a difference because you only have the entire annual option. Currently today, Nintendo has not put out any kind of monthly tier pricing structure for their expansion pack service. Whether or not they'll do that in the future, that's all up for debate and speculation, but it currently sits at a price of $49.99 for an individual membership. However, we do have to briefly talk about, if you have multiple Switch users in the household, it is by far and away a better deal to get the family membership. And even if you just have friends that have Switches and it's somebody you can trust to pay the bill, or another family member that lives in a different household, you could essentially get either of these for the annual discounted price of the individual membership on the base tier being $49.99, or the family tier on the expansion pack being $79.99. The thing about the family pack membership option with Nintendo is they allow up to 8 different accounts to be connected to it, so you can split the cost quite a few different ways with different friends, loved ones, and relatives if they are willing to pay a portion of that. Or maybe you're just going to surprise everybody for Christmas, and everybody who has a Switch can hop onto your plan, and you pay that $80 price for the expansion pack, and they have all of the features that this service has to offer. Now, to quickly dive through some of the features on essentially the base tier starting out, and of course, if you get the expansion pack, it comes with everything in the base tier in addition to all of the stuff that is not there, so keep that in mind. You have the basic online play. You also have NES and SNES library of games. N64, even though it's on the screen right now, is locked behind the expansion pack tier. And you have save data cloud backups, to where if you break your Switch, if for some reason something gets deleted physically on there, you still have your save game data and it's not totally lost. And the biggest thing I think for this service is the classic library of games for NES and SNES, and then the ability to play all of the notable Switch games online. When you talk about classic games, we will hop into where the NES library sits today. And while Nintendo could theoretically continue to update these games, we do not see them frequently hit on things like the NES and SNES right now. We get batch updates of Sega Genesis games, and we get essentially a new N64 game just about every month. But when it comes to the NES and SNES, it feels like what we have here is probably going to be the depth of what we will ultimately see Nintendo support for these systems, and they may throw a curveball in true Nintendo fashion and surprise us with some big classics that are still missing. But I think that they've built out the libraries of these classic systems to essentially what they feel comfortable with, and you're going to see as we scroll through the list here some of the classics that you know and love. Of course, the original Super Mario Bros, Super Mario Bros 3, the original Legend of Zelda, a true staple series. I mean, it's what started Nintendo. This is literally their first home console system that was sold to the masses, and it has all of the classic franchises that are still here today. And so you can kind of see your own list of maybe games that stick out to you as we scroll through here. You also have these SP editions, which I am not very much a fan of and don't think that they add a whole lot of value personally for me, but they're essentially an altered save file of the game where you're typically starting at the very end of the game, or there's some kind of special stipulation, like you can only use certain types of items. And again, it's there as a feature set, but not necessarily something that I think adds a bunch of value. Now, what's cool is that you can play all of these games that support 2 players. With that, you can even support any games that have online play, the ability to do that, which I don't think there's near as many NES, if at all. I don't know that I've played an NES title online, but you do have that ability to do things like online play on the Nintendo Switch on all of these classic games, the ones that support it, mind you. You then have to talk about the SNES library of games. That again is in the same camp of don't expect a bunch of updates to hit monthly on this thing, like we are seeing new N64 games continuing to drop in and occasionally a batch of 3 to 5 Genesis games. I think Nintendo's essentially done with these, but you do have some classics. Most recently, games like Earthworm Jim 2, you have the staple Super Mario World, you have Super Metroid. I mean, truly, the Super Nintendo, you get into arguably some of the best titles in some of these franchises, period. I would still say to this day that my personal favorite Donkey Kong game is none other than Donkey Kong Country 2. It is 2D platforming at its finest with one of the most banger soundtracks you've ever heard. There's a lot of fun and nostalgia to experience in these titles if you did grow up with them, or even if you're somebody who's newer to gaming, or maybe you want to re-experience these games with your kids because, you know, they're younger now and they didn't grow up with these titles, but you can share kind of your own experience with them. There's a pretty large library of games that you can go back and experience now. And at one point in time, I was very much a critic of this service, especially the expansion pack for the price. But I do think that Nintendo's come a long way with the vast library of games that are now supported. And you do have to have the conversation around this being a subscription service, meaning if you ever stop paying, you don't have access to these games anymore. And that is definitely a big downside. However, there is also some upside, because what Nintendo used to give us was something called Virtual Console. And with Virtual Console, you could make a one-time purchase for a lot of these classic games. You would then own them and not have to be subscribed. And I wish we had that as an option. However, the reality is I bought multiple Virtual Console titles over and over again on different systems, and I don't hook up the Wii or Wii U just to re-experience them. So now with Nintendo and what they're calling their Nintendo account infrastructure, they are claiming to roll this forward for the foreseeable future into most likely whatever is next for their next generation system, which means in a perfect world, if as long as you stay subscribed, you don't ever have to pay these fees again. You're just always going to be paying, which I know sounds kind of silly, and I'm not the biggest fan of subscription services either, but at least they should hopefully, in theory, roll forward onto whatever is next for new Nintendo hardware that we're probably only a couple years, if not just 1 year or more away from Nintendo most likely revealing something, but that's a whole nother can of worms. We're going to now talk about the expansion pack tier, which the big draw for this price upgrade and why Nintendo wants you to pay that $50 annual price point is for their N64 catalog of games. Now, the real value add with these titles is, first of all, they look better than ever. They are up-resed. They're not going to be a crystal clear HD quality, like it still is the same base polygons and things like that, but they're up-resed in a really nice way, and they definitely look more crisp, and the color just pops on them more than ever. But the biggest thing is the online play with things like N64, when you do have that 4-player support. And the one asterisk with this is that you may want to try to track down, and I thought I had my controller laying here somewhere, I just might, but you may want to track down one of these N64 classic controllers. Now, these are pretty much out of stock at all times, but they do sell them on the Nintendo Switch store front that you can just go in and purchase them. It is a wireless N64 controller that works fantastic. And the one thing about the N64 games is because it's such a unique button layout, they don't play quite as well on something like a Pro controller that I'm using to navigate this with. And so I highly recommend that $50 purchase if you really want to dive into these N64 games and experience them the way you may be remembered. However, that is not required, so keep that in mind when we're talking about this. But I grew up as a fan of F-Zero X. I can now hop online and play that game and race against other friends that I also grew up with playing that game, Mario Kart 64. So, you know, you see the kind of library you have here that you can experience this online with friends, or you can just play single player classics like Super Mario 64, Zelda Ocarina of Time, arguably being worth the service price alone, although there are other ways to play that game now, of course, but Majora's Mask, Banjo-Kazooie. We have Mario Party 1 and 2 most recently added to the service. We know we will be getting 3 next year as well. There's even a list of what additional games Nintendo will be throwing into the service, and one that many fans are expecting to hit potentially in December, and it might be out at the time that you're watching this video. It might not. GoldenEye is coming to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, which is absolutely a game changer. That is legitimately what put first-person shooters on the map, and it has the same classic 4-player split screen multiplayer intact. At least we think it's split screen. Every other game is, so I would imagine that is too. That's going to be available with online play on the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, which again, I would argue makes it worth that additional price point. Granted, you have to sign up for the whole year at once, so definitely take that into consideration, but there's going to be more N64 games to come, and there's already been a vast library of ones built up here in recent months, and over the years, over the year rather, just a little over a year that this has been available, they've also fixed a lot of the bugs and glitches that were initially there when the service launched in terms of emulation on N64 games. They look much better than ever, and they don't have input delay and noticeable problems that they once had, and I was highly critical of when they did originally release. Now, lastly, you do have things like the Sega Genesis library of games that also come with online multiplayer, as all of these games do. And it is going to, I think, continue to build out to be a very nice looking library. Genesis has some fantastic games, and there is a data leak that actually shows, or a data mine rather, that shows something like 55 total Genesis titles slated for the service, and we are nowhere near that yet. And then also something like 38 total N64 games. So these services, or these consoles rather, still have a long life of updates ahead of them, which is definitely a great thing. So now, if Nintendo chooses to do bottom of the barrel games, nobody may really care about that, but they also may choose to, you know, add in some missing classics that I think that you could argue both Genesis and N64 need some big classics still that are not on their platform today. So this is one of the exciting things of being a Nintendo Switch owner and an NSO subscriber, is you always have some kind of new update around the corner to look forward to when Nintendo chooses to do it. I wish it was on a more consistent schedule. It is pretty much your best guess on when they decide to update it. It just drops and goes live, or it says next week for this N64 game, or next month. Sometimes they give us a little bit of heads up, but other times it is very sporadic. So be aware of that. And then the last thing to quickly tackle is things like the additional DLC packs that they may have advertised in this app somewhere. I'm pretty sure they do. This is just the Nintendo Switch Online Central Hub, but you do have, let's see, expansion pack. I think it's under that portion. You do have a few different games that you have DLC packs available for because of this. Splatoon 2 is probably the one that's maybe the least played out of the DLC packs, I would say. Definitely, now that Splatoon 3 is out, many players have migrated to that. The Splatoon 2 DLC Octo expansion is included in this. Animal Crossing Happy Home Paradise, which is a huge game that has such a loyal giant fan base that really, I mean, this is a 40 million unit seller on the Switch now. Animal Crossing has a giant community around it, and you get their $25 DLC as long as you are an expansion pack subscriber. And then lastly, and this is the big one for me, is Super Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass rather. And this has 3 waves this year, and then it has another 3 waves next year that Nintendo will continue to support through the end of 2023. each with 8 new courses. So they are giving you a reason to boot up the classic Mario Kart that is in the Black Friday promotion for the Nintendo Switch console. And you do get a 3-month, I believe, token for a redemption of a base tier Nintendo Switch online subscription, not the expansion pack. All these DLCs and N64 and Sega Genesis are locked behind that expansion pack, so keep that in mind. But this is an ongoing roadmap of new tracks, some classic revised, and then some brand new ones from Mario Kart Tour, as that's their mobile game that Nintendo's developing. And you actually do get this $25 value DLC as part of the pack. If you don't want to mess with the expansion pack, but you do want this DLC, it can be purchased separately for $25. In fact, all of these can, fortunately, but they are a nice perk to have, kind of soften the blow around the $50 annual price point rather, or $80 again if you are on a family plan. So where my personal stance on this today is that there is a lot of value to be had and a lot of fun to be had. I've honestly had a great time playing through all of these classic games in 2021 and 2022 since the expansion pack launched, and that's where I would make my recommendation around it. I do feel like that additional price point is actually now justified and worth it with the mix of DLC, not to mention we'll probably get more DLC packs in the future, and the ongoing roadmap and support updates around new consoles. And we may even see Nintendo choose to add in things like the Game Boy family of systems to something like the expansion pack tier. At least I'm sure they'll lock Game Boy Advance behind the expansion pack tier, which I think is going to be the big value driver for people to resubscribe next year. And they'll probably keep going slowly with the service from there. So I definitely think the expansion pack is worth it. If you just want the base tier and you want things like online play and not so much of the broader retro library of console games, well then at that point it might make more sense for you to look into just the base tier. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your thoughts and feelings around Nintendo Switch Online, the base tier and expansion pack. How do you feel about it? Are you considering purchasing it for the first time or for somebody else? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around this topic. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.